Welcome to Lansing Online News Radio. This is Bonnie Buckaroo, soon to be joined by my co-host Bill Castanier. This is LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. On a cold and stormy night, after the weekend I was lulled into a false sense of security that it was going to be a nice warm winter, but I don't know anymore. We'll see.
I thought we were in Miami.
I went on Saturday night, however, and enjoyed the warm weather and shot a bunch of pictures of the Broad Museum on that Saturday night reception where the people had paid $150 a ticket to go in, and I'm sure it was a wine and cheese type thing. In fact, I did sneak a few pictures of the hors d'oeuvres over there in the tent next door. The building is gorgeous at night, but as you'll notice, I wrote an article for Lansing Online News about my concerns about the building. I'd call it a case of bad zoning, bad ductwork, and big art. So, not exactly flattering, but that's why we have an alt press.
I won't get Mike Rush on the show this week.
We weren't doing well with that
No,
anyhow. No, I have certain reservations about the facility. I just think it's in the wrong place.
I think a lot of people do that.
They do.
The sighting could have been better.
It's a question. I was interested too that I had quoted or had used an example of the artwork I would have liked to have seen there, and used a piece of art from Judy Chicago, and then we got a comment from her at the bottom saying that she was a little nervous about big art herself. So at least it kicked off an interesting discussion.
Yeah, and I just want to compliment you on the photographs. The photography was incredible. It's the best shot I've seen of the Broad. That nighttime shot you took.
That's because nobody else has any nighttime shots, and I don't know why.
They're harder to take.
Well, that's true. Yeah, I have a very good lens on that camera, nice wide-angle lens. It's a striking facility in the evening, there's no doubt. It does look like an alien spaceship that has landed on the corner. But I don't really know why you would want Five Guys Burgers and Fries as your backdrop for a $40 million building. As I said, it's sort of like plopping a metal skin trailer in amongst a whole bunch of historic brick homes.
So I think it looks like the Nautilus.
The Nautilus.
20,000 leagues beneath the sea, especially at night when it comes up. Rising in the ocean. There's going to be a lot of discussion about it. There's no question about that.
Absolutely, I think there will be. But we're here tonight. We are joined. We had talked prior to the election that we were going to invite back our guests, Ray Holman of the United Auto Workers and Emily Devendorf of Michigan Pride, to do an election wrap-up, no matter which way it came out. And for the most part, were you happy?
You know, for me, it was mixed results.
Okay.
I was ecstatic to see President Obama reelected. I was really happy to see the emergency manager dictator law defeated. That was awesome.
It was.
It was very disappointing, however, to see the collective bargaining ballot Prop 2 go down in flames.
Huge disappointment.
It was.
I think also Prop 3 for energy. I was concerned that we did see so many that should have gone.
That's right.
Yeah, that was very disappointing. So where does that leave us?
Well, the other thing that was interesting was the House race. Of course, the Michigan House of Representatives was up for a vote this year, and the Democrats did pick up 5 seats. They needed at least 10 to take over the majority, but they picked up 5 seats. What's a little frustrating now is they only needed, I believe, 3,000 more votes across 4 different seats to tie.
That was so close.
So it was so close, and I did a lot of campaigning myself. I was up in the Upper Peninsula, and Scott Dianda up in House District 110-1, and that was great. His family's been up in Copper Country since the 1890s and goes way back, and to help him come across the finish line, that was rewarding.
Well, Emily, you saw 2 states by direct vote this time, not because of legal maneuvering or someone's intercession, but 2 states voted in same-sex marriage, which had to look good, I would think.
Yeah, at this point we can actually officially say that 3 states now have marriage equality. This year we had 4 states on the ballot looking at marriage equality. We had Maine, Maryland, and Washington State voting to make marriage equality legal, and we had Minnesota voting against banning marriage equality. And 4 out of 4 this year, after trying over 30 times to accomplish this for any state. So it was a great night nationally, just seeing the political tides turning. And it was great in Michigan, because despite the fact that we're still in the same political climate in terms of where our Michigan government is and not being able to flip the House towards more pro-equality legislators, we were able to have more than half of all of our pro-equality endorsed candidates win, and they were very blunt about their position in favor of equality, and we what we were able to see is something that has been supported by studies, and that's being on the side of equality is being on the same side as the public, and it does not hurt you when you are running to be an elected leader.
When we're looking at Michigan and the situation we're in where we'd have to repeal our existing law, is there a sense that you want to wait until the time is right before trying to mount a campaign to do that? Or is there the sense that the Supreme Court might speak in the meanwhile, so we should wait to see if the U.S. Supreme Court takes a position? What is the best thinking of the strategists here in Michigan?
Equality Michigan has taken the position that there is no time to waste on this issue. Certainly since the public is in favor of this, since we are waiting for the president to take action on repealing the Defense of Marriage Act on the national level, while we are trying to do very basic things like amend the state Elliott Larson Civil Rights Act to end discrimination in employment and housing, we also need to be acknowledging that the public is ready and really demanding that we start to work towards marriage equality. And as you said, in Michigan, that means first repealing our constitutional amendment to ban marriage equality. So the work towards that starts now, and I would expect possible movement on that on the ballot level, I would say 2016.
Yeah, I would think it would be not good in an off-year election.
No, and there's much work to do, despite the fact that the public would be on our side were they to know that these issues exist in Michigan. We need to do a good amount of education work to let people know exactly where Michigan is on equality issues. And one of the hard lessons we learned this last election and the election before is that money plays a real part in campaigns these days after Citizens United, and we need people to opt in and invest in the policy change that they'd like to see happen.
Even after the argument that somehow because Obama won and because the Democrats did well, that money didn't count, money still does count. It's just a question of how you
Obama
raise it.
spent a lot of money.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It was fascinating to look at how he micro-targeted with his funds from, put in $5 in the pot to have dinner with George Clooney. I was looking up, they raised like $12 million with that. $15 million with the fundraiser. Did
I'm
Clooney
still
alone
waiting for the
almost
call.
bankrolled?
Maybe it wasn't Clooney. I think it was Michelle that asked me. But
Ray, I looked at that ballot initiative, and one of the questions I had for you is that do you think that the governor and the Republican legislature are going to do an end run around the Michigan emergency manager law so quickly that it will nullify what happened at the ballot box?
Yeah, I know they're already talking about doing that, and I'm sure that we're going to have to face that. But hopefully, the political tide has turned a little bit, and we can come up with a better plan. Again, it was nice to see that defeated. And what's funny about that is the two ballot proposals that really affected my members, or collective bargaining rights, or union members, was ballot proposal 1 and 2. And it was interesting to me that ballot proposal 1, which was truly a grassroots effort, and I really admire everybody that joined in that, and really, we didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
There was some union support. I think wasn't real involved. But I mean, we really fight it through the courts, and then actually to see that win was really gratifying. And then when you kind of compare that to ballot proposal 2, which was a traditional sort of a top-down ballot proposal that all the big leaders got involved with, and we had national experts come in to help us out. And to see that go down in flames was interesting. I mean, we can debate whether it was an overreach or not, but it's important to remember that the citizens in Michigan still support collective bargaining rights, even though ballot proposal 2 went down. We've done polls, actually, even since the election, that shows that the majority of citizens support the ability to bargain.
I've got a question. The last few days in the newspapers said that what happened was a big victory for our governor. I personally disagreed. I don't think you can carry that over into an election for yourself because of ballot issues. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, ballot proposal 6 was a big one for him, and ballot proposal 5, which actually we were happy to see go down too, which is about supermajority in both the House and the Senate to raise taxes. So I guess you could consider those victories for Governor Snyder. But one thing that we're really keeping our eyes on is this lame duck session coming up, and the big elephant in the room, so to speak, is right-to-work legislation. And unfortunately, we've had the leaders of the Republican Party bring that to the forefront again. So we're scrambling again and hoping we can survive to January 1st without actually becoming a right-to-work state.
That's the other thing I wondered about. Right at the end, Romney started talking about a national right-to-work law. I think that was the first anybody had. I don't think anybody asked him about it because they didn't think it would be part of their platform. But it appears the Republicans are really poised to try to do this at all levels.
I think that there are some that it's almost a religion for. It's this giant trophy that they want. I think other Republicans that I've talked to aren't so gung-ho about it. I think it will, be divisive and just, be a big fight. People have asked me, do we still have the stomach to put people in the streets after losing ballot proposal 2? I think if you do take away our rights, I think people will turn out again. We're hoping again we can make it through lean session without them putting forth the new legislation. One thing that's really scary, pernicious, is actually they're talking about making the right to work only for public employees.
Right.
So
They really are targeting public employees like crazy, aren't
it's
they? It's your
messed
people they're
up.
going
Exactly.
for. Why are they going for your people?
They don't like us.
What?
They don't like us.
They don't do that.
No.
I mean, they just view you as these takers instead of the makers, right? Feeding at the
Easy
public
targets.
trough. Oh.
That's right. That's
Wow.
right. So, they're going to be coming back into session on November 27th, and I'm sure they're talking behind closed doors right now. And Governor Snyder's still saying he doesn't want it on his agenda, but he won't say for sure that he would veto it. And I don't know what would happen if it actually got on his desk, but I know that my colleagues and myself are trying to make sure that doesn't happen. We're trying to talk to some reasonable Republicans, and if we can find any, and take the air out of the balloon, so to speak, and say, hey, you guys won. I mean, what's the deal here? Give it some break.
We talked earlier, and we talked over the weeks about how the micro-targeting that the Obama people did was just extraordinary. Using the kind of expertise that we're talking about with data mining and being able to know on a block who is the power person, get to that person through 15 different ways, including tweets and Facebook and emails and everything else. But what I was thinking? Historically, it's been the unions that the Democrats have relied on for get out the vote. And it's been the churches that the Republicans have relied on, the fundamentalist churches. They both have two strong organizations. People get together all the time, face to face. I worry that somehow this new micro-targeting effort, which is a money-driven thing, it's a data-driven thing and a cyberspace thing rather than a phone bank done by local union people you'd know. Does that sort of leave the union out of the equation in that sense, more than ever in the past?
I'm not sure. We're doing things like that too. I think that Obama ground game was great. They had a lot of 2 years or 3 years of practice to get ready, and I think they, strategically they did better than Romney.
Oh, yeah.
I think,
Absolutely.
And so we have a lot to learn from their strategies. I also think, really, the country's demographics are changing. It doesn't bode well for Republicans. So I think that was probably had more to do with it than anything else.
Now, does your organization have the capacity to use that kind of data mining, identify your allies and people who will come out for you on your issues?
We do, and we work with other progressive organizations in order to make sure we have a coordinated effort using those wonderful tools. And as Ray mentioned, one of the weaknesses of the Republican Party this time may be their major flaw, was their very slim, their very tiny target that is not up with the times, whereas the Democratic Party seems to be an open door, and it seems to recognize that there are a number of demographics that tend to go their way in looking out for their own best interests. They're trying to broaden their efforts to reach more and more people and a much wider platform and something inclusive, and Republicans are still very focused on affluent white men. That's
They want to pray for you.
the one demographic that is just not growing.
I know. Beagles is down too.
Much as General Petraeus has been doing his part.
Right. Actually, it's interesting you brought that up because I've heard rumors that Mike Rogers might be up for the top job with the CIA, which actually
Really?
would be interesting because, I don't know how realistic it is.
I saw that too.
Well, he's former FBI.
Yeah, but
I saw that today too, and
Why would they pick a Republican? In order to open up that seat so he could get it?
I'm just trying to spice up your show. I don't know
I
how
get-
realistic
I saw the
it
same
is.
thing. You wonder if you could pass the background test.
Ooh, ouch.
well,
You don't know.
that's what I heard. We don't really know how it is that he came to leave.
Huh.
position there. So.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
well, that's going to be an interesting one. It's been interesting
Things
to
happen when you go through background checks. Real things happen.
It's when they pull out that polygraph at the
Yeah,
CIA.
they find out you're having an affair or something. You
Well,
know?
but it seems like there was a breakdown here with the polygraph in General Petraeus' case, I gather. It sounds as though there may be, apparently, he's suffering his own sort of set of bimbo eruptions these days. And one more has surfaced, apparently, this Jill Kelly woman, so this is getting quite interesting.
She's a volunteer social secretary on the base or whatever that was.
Yeah, that's, I guess, what they call them nowadays. You're listening to LCC Radio, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. We're talking with Ray Holman of the UAW and Emily Devendorf of, is it Equality Michigan? Did I have it wrong? It's not Michigan Pride, it's Equality Michigan.
I help Michigan Pride in the summertime for the celebration, but it's Equality Michigan.
Okay. And we're talking about the results of the last election, and we had some interesting things happen nationally as well. We had a couple more pro-pot states.
Right,
That's
right.
always
2
good
states.
news.
That's going to be interesting. Now they're talking about they'd be great places for tourism.
well, yeah.
Amsterdam is shutting down, so it's
Yeah.
time to go to Denver.
Open up a dispensary across from the new borough. That'd be a nice throwback there.
Look
yeah.
how many women got elected to the Senate.
That was wonderful to see. New Hampshire's almost solidly women now. One of the things I think this was a sea change for was that a lot of people felt after the midterm elections that somehow there'd been this lurch to the right and the Tea Party was in its ascendancy. And really, they're even finding now that if you target words like social justice, it sells well again. You know, we went through a period of time where you didn't say those words because they were a little bit too incendiary. But I think people are realizing, I think we're on the cusp of major change. Climate change is back on the agenda. What kind of issues what does this mean for Michigan long term? We're pretty solidly Republican here. We did get Bridget McCormick.
That's right. There's still a Republican control,
Yeah.
but Bridget McCormick did win. I think that West Side
Yes.
or the TV show spot. that
West
she got.
Wing.
West
West
Wing,
Wing,
yes.
yes.
I must think that really helped her. Not that she's not qualified, but unfortunately Republicans still maintain control.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Michigan Supreme Court is starting to change. I think she will have an impact. I mean,
Yes.
I think, I think that may be a multiple-step process to get that court changed. It's
You know,
not
that,
gonna happen
that
in one
in
fell
fact,
swoop.
that surprised me because they reelected 2 Republicans. And
It surprised me too.
the ballot pretty much went Democratic in Michigan.
I thought Kelly would get it.
I thought she would too, so that was kind of a surprise. I don't know where the disconnect is on that.
I think that came down to name recognition, lack of name recognition, and there were a lot of confusing campaign tactics that were happening immediately
There
the
were.
week before, especially concerning the Supreme Court. I heard a lot about robocalls where the calls were misidentifying who was endorsed by the Republicans and who was endorsed by the Democrats.
Yeah,
Just
that's right.
really
Yes.
shady stuff.
The really bad stuff. I got a couple of those a few years ago for reasons that remain murky to me, but it was some convoluted logic about I voted Republican at a primary, and apparently it keeps you on the list forever. So I get all of those robocalls, and it's kind of interesting to see all the dirty tricks that were taking place right beforehand.
Yeah.
Do you figure that, Ray, that in terms of the broader union membership, that the big issue in Ohio was the auto bailout, and that probably was the big issue here?
Oh, definitely. That was definitely, I think, probably assured President Obama re-election. But speaking nationally and talking about President Obama, I wanted to throw this out there. I think it's important that we push President Obama to be the
Absolutely.
president that we want him to be. And I think that's huge. I know he's coming up to his big fiscal cliff, negotiations and everything. But, we need to make President Obama do the things that he ran on. And I think we need to hold him accountable. And don't get me wrong, I voted for President Obama. The UAW wholeheartedly supported him. But we need to hold him accountable now, too.
We tried to get him before the election to commit that he would not touch Medicare or Social Security, and he wouldn't commit. And that's scary because it does seem as though it's almost a foregone conclusion that any deal is going to include rollbacks on those social programs. I'm not sure that this time that's a smart move, but how do we push him? What do we do to push him?
I think we need to stay active. We need to stay in the streets. We need to stay engaged. We need to keep our energy up. We need to, one thing that I'm actually doing on Friday is organizing a group of people to go to Atlantic City to help with the hurricane relief.
Oh, really?
And trying to, we got a group of local 6,000 members that are going to be doing that. And I know that's not necessarily politics, but we need to stay out there in the streets. We need to stay physically moving around, staying active, and staying engaged. Definitely. And I think what happened in 2008, everybody thought we won, and we sort of left it up to President Obama, and then we got our butts handed to us in 2010. So stuff like that, I think, is really important.
I was surprised this week and pleased as well to see the Occupy movement come back with Occupy Sandy, where now they're even doing so well that they're training the National Guard and doing things to train other organizations about how you do this kind of relief effort. I think there is a sort of reawakening. We put climate change back on the agenda. That's another important issue we're going to have to push on. What do you see, Bill? Do you see groups ready to move on this?
On climate change?
On all these
on
issues.
all issues?
Progressive issues?
Not as many as I'd like to,
Well,
I guess. I mean, the ones like your organization are, but I think there's a whole lot of other issues, especially that relate to poverty.
well, that's been off the agenda and
It
it's
sure
not
has.
discussed
I
at
mean,
all.
we are still a poor country. We probably have 37, 40 million people who are in poverty in this country.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
What have you thought about these corporate execs who've come out now and are saying that they're going to start firing all these people now that they have to give them Obamacare?
Yeah, that's interesting. I have seen that in the news, and I really don't know what to make of it. It's really interesting to me. I have quite a few Republican friends, and it was fascinating to me how surprised they were that Romney lost.
They were, weren't they?
And I was just thinking to myself, you guys don't look at the polls. You've been like watching Fox News, like nonstop. What's going on? I mean, have you heard of Nate Silver? I mean, this guy was telling us for weeks and months that Obama, there's no way he was going to lose.
But
And by the way, this guy Nate Silver is amazing. A guy that all 50 states.
It's Lansing, Michigan.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. But anyway,
But they had their own version, you
Yeah.
see. Their unskewed poll guy,
I
right, who
guess,
told
yeah.
them. But they had their alternate version of everything. They
Right.
had their alternate version of science and evolution and climate
Right.
change and, you know.
Right. And it was really hard.
They
for
do
me-
not live in a fact-based
yeah,
world.
Yeah. I didn't rub it in, but it was hard not to. It really was. But they were totally surprised and shocked and angry too. Really
yeah.
angry. It was really surprising.
But Emily, you were telling us that some people tuned into Fox News that their ratings spiked not because of followers, but because everybody was enjoying
Just
watching
because
them
of the
sweat.
entertainment. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think their responses are insensitive and unrealistic, and
And the Karl Rove moment will live forever in the
Yeah.
annals of really interesting TV.
I happened to tune in just for that moment. It was quite amazing. And he's saying, well, don't be calling Ohio yet. I mean, I think he thought he would get a repeat of 2000. It was quite spectacular. Do you really, though, Ray, want to be the person that goes out and tells people that gave you a few $100 million that you didn't get anything for it? I mean, that was a
Yeah.
massive investment.
Yeah, it really was. It was really interesting, and it was funny to see his status sort of deflate over this election, Karl Rove. But yeah, they wasted a lot of money.
You know what I'm worried about, though, Ray, and we've talked about this. It doesn't take much money to move down ballot races in states. A little bit of an investment and you can get a big, big kickback. Do you think that that's what they'll do the next time and we have to be prepared for that? And that they'll start putting money into the Michigan House races? Because you could really control things if you can go down ballot with
I think that's
relatively
what
small
started to really happen in 2010 when the state legislatures became the battlegrounds. And so they probably will, I would imagine.
And the amount of money they gave is really a drop in the bucket.
Oh, absolutely. For the opportunity.
For the people who gave it,
Right.
doesn't matter to them.
When you
It's like
take
Matty Burnham, 33 million. Who cares? He made 60 million a year
Yeah.
on this bridge.
Yeah, that's a modest investment for the return that
Mhm.
could potentially get. When you look at it, do you, in retrospect, think that there was any chance that, I think Romney was such a flawed candidate. When you look at somebody who was so easily targeted for his money in Swiss bank accounts and the Cayman Islands and the 47% tape, all the things that he did, his personal failings, he's not a warm and engaging Bill Clinton kind of guy. I mean, was that just,
Yeah.
if they'd have had a decent candidate, would we have been in trouble?
I don't think he was the best candidate. I think he was, he's toned deaf. And also, I think, he has, the problem with the Republicans is they have to worry about being primaried, right? They have
Right.
to cater to the Tea Party to get
Yeah.
through the primary elections. So then they're in trouble when they get to the general election. So he had to try to tack back to the center, and it was really hard for him. Which is funny, that first debate where he actually was pretty moderate, right? The first debate he had with
Oh,
Barack Obama is
shockingly
when
moderate.
when he did the best. But
Yeah.
the problem was, he's tacking way back from the primary, and I think that's the difficulty and the challenge that the Republicans are going to have, moving forward. I'm not so sure about here in Michigan, but definitely nationally.
While he might not be an ideal candidate to us anywhere near, or somebody who's fit for the job, perhaps all of those executives that are coming out saying I'd rather cut my employees' pay than pay for health insurance, and the disbelief of the Republicans are showing us that he may in fact be representative of that tiny base that is the Republican Party right now. Maybe he's not a great candidate to us because we don't see him as a great leader, but he's representing the values and the viewpoints we're seeing post-election.
I kind of thought Bill Kristol threw him under the bus, though, when he said that, we're not going to fall on our swords anymore for the millionaires and billionaires and their tax cuts, half of whom vote Democratic anyhow. So I think he had, Mitt in his sights as somebody he wasn't necessarily going to support. We're joined by Glenn Stutzky from MSU School of Social Work and a political activist. You've been busy on a lot of issues of social justice over the years. What do you think of the latest election?
Well, what I would like to tell you is that I have a class that has about 120 freshmen and sophomores, and I am just thrilled because when I asked how many of them actually voted for the first time, Bonnie, I swear 4/5 of the class raised their hand. I almost fainted and I almost cried. I've been looking for a generation to begin to come up that would engage, politically. A couple of the students actually took the day off and worked at the polls. I mean, they were actually workers and things. It was just very encouraging. And we did a straw poll the morning of the election.
Oh, did you?
And I asked them, of course, I didn't ask them who did they vote for, but who did they think was going to win the election.
Mm-hmm.
It came back 83% for Obama and 17% for Mitt Romney.
And I suspect that reflected a lot of not just their guesswork, but their sympathies, I
think
suspect.
it was probably pretty close.
Yeah.
But the most encouraging thing was to see some young first-time voters get enthusiastic about an election. It was wonderful.
What do you think explains that kind of engagement in that generation? What do you think has changed that explains that increased engagement?
Because the youth vote went up
Yeah.
from 2008, which was a shock to me.
And people were not expecting.
Yeah.
Except I think the Obama campaign was expecting it. I think they knew. I really do.
I think LGBT issues motivate more students than almost anything else. 3 or 4 years ago, oddly enough, it was Darfur. That was a hot issue on campus, a lot of students talking about it, but now you'd be amazed. Are you seeing the same thing in your classes?
Well, yes, I am. I think you're right, Bonnie. And there is a widening gap between this generation coming up and that generation that's in the established right now. We're seeing just foundational, the sand is just shifting.
Yeah.
The whole paradigm is changing. And I told him, I said, I welcome you to this process, and I'm looking forward to the next decade to watch you.
So does that mean the sales of Ayn Rand are going to go down, or what? I want to know. I want to get in on that market.
Nobody's applying to the University of Chicago anymore. They're seeing declining enrollments. I don't know. No, I didn't see the level of activism that I had thought I would see on campus this year. I mean, it didn't seem like there was this fervor. That's why I was so surprised at the numbers.
Yes, there wasn't so much in terms of overt activity, but it was more internal, which actually I was more pleased with, to see people who were thinking about things. We had a lot of debates, pro and con, on a lot of the issues, and I would rather see some of that internal change, than just the outward, rallies and things like that. I hope I'm recognizing that, because if it is, then it's a real thing. It's not just an emotional thing. It has reached them in a place of their reason. That's
Well, Ray was just talking about how to succeed, if we're going to make President Obama do the things the progressives want him to do, we have to stay on him. Will young people stay on him? Are there mechanisms or channels for them to put pressure on the system?
I think we're going to find ourselves very surprised, because in terms of the technology that's available,
Okay.
I mean, some of the students were setting up Facebook pages to put out their positions in that, and I think that they're linking into this, and they're going to put pressure in ways that maybe isn't familiar to all of us who are a little bit older.
I wonder too, we were talking about how this election didn't prove money doesn't matter. It just more proves that you need to raise money and put it in the right places. Building that kind of cyber infrastructure so young people can communicate with each other, do the kind of data mining, grassroots level organizing, that may be different than just putting ads on TV.
Absolutely.
And we still need to know how to tap into that. I know that
We do.
You know, I agree that I'm very encouraged by the youth vote, but I also agree with Ray that nothing happens the way that we want it to, regardless of this wave of support, if we don't continue to push and let our leaders know what our expectations are and that we're going to hold them accountable if they don't meet those expectations. And I do see much less activism from youth than wanting to actually cast that vote. And in the past, it's been worrisome that they didn't even want to vote, and I don't think that that's from lack of want. I notice when I do political activation trainings and teach students how to mobilize, that once you give them the tools, they're excited and they direct that energy and they know how to organize themselves, but you have to give them a goal and let them know this is how many people we need together and this is what we're trying to accomplish, and these are the 4 ways you can try to do it.
I think the one thing that's still missing, the one thing I've still been looking for decades, is the charismatic student leaders. I haven't seen them yet.
That's a good point.
I'm waiting to hear that voice from that charismatic person or persons. I don't see that yet. They're great at organizing in groups. They're very good at group type work.
That's a good point.
You give them those 4 things and they'll put it together. And
But they need somebody to provide direction.
Where's Bill Clinton at 20? Yeah, someone with that kind of...
Tom Hayden.
Yeah, right, Tom Hayden.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that person will come along because they'll be the time, they'll be the catalyst, and it's just, you can't make it happen. I just hope we can, recognize it when it comes about. Those people are out there. Hopefully we will hear their
Well,
voices
you want to
soon.
use at Michigan State and you'll find them.
I'm looking.
You keep
I'm
calling.
looking.
Come guest lecture at my class. I got 264 of them. Maybe you can find this the next coming year. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting era. We're seeing the older generation fade away. That's what the demographics are showing, so that over time. The only thing I think that is, we need to put that into perspective sometimes, is that I was looking at the time that apartheid was still in place in South Africa. There were 4 people of color for every white voter back in South Africa. So you have to recognize that power is not easily wrested from the people who have it. It isn't just a numbers game. It's being able to figure out really what you're talking about, which is how to mobilize people. I don't know, though, that the going into the streets matters as much as it does anymore. I don't know that, going down to the Capitol. We've seen over the last couple of years a lot of energy spent trying to get people down to the Capitol steps, but I don't know if that's a terribly effective route to go anymore.
No, I will say that when we had the vagina monologues at the Capitol, we had thousands of women showing up for that, but then when we asked them to come back to do a legislative action lobby day where we would actually visit our leaders and tell them what we needed, we got a couple hundred.
The numbers drop like crazy.
Yeah.
They'll do the flashy sort of things. I was talking today with a coalition of women's groups from across the state, and just by rough calculation, they put in somewhere around $380,000 worth of PAC money. So that has quite an impact. I mean, women are a real political force. They didn't come out in the greater numbers that we had expected. I actually thought women would be. We were 55% Obama, and when you look at things like the youth vote was much larger, the Hispanic vote, the African American vote. We got to get more women engaged in this, so we have to do a better job of reaching out to them.
Yeah, and I also think things take time. I mentioned earlier before the show started, last night I was at Michigan State and I saw the movie 1913 Massacre, and of course that took place, that tragedy where a bunch of people were crushed during a Christmas Eve party in Calumet, Michigan, when somebody yelled fire, and there was no fire, and everybody ran to the bottom of the stairs. Was during a copper strike, strike. And after the film was over, there was a Michigan State professor there who explained that actually the union never got in either. It was until decades later that they became unionized. So you see that there's these long periods of struggle where you don't have much to show for it. And I think nowadays we're in this mode that we think we go out to the Capitol and then, the next day the laws are going to change, right? So, but it's a long struggle, and so that sort of I was thinking about that when I listened to the professor after watching that movie last night.
That's a good reminder.
I was invited last week to do a guest lecture on the muckrakers, and that meant I spent quite a bit of time putting together a long presentation what interested me was how you could connect their articles and their writing directly to legislation. You know, to the Meat Act, Inspection Acts, to the Pure Food and Drug Act, to the Federal Trade Commission. All of these things were directly to legislation, but as you say, often there's a lag. There's the mobilization, there's the awareness phase, and then it eventually leads to the right kind of action.
Right, right.
Well, we need
This
to...
was fun. We'll do it again. too.
Yes, thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank
Thank you
you.
to Ray Holman and Emily Diefendorf, Ray from UAW and Emily from Equality Michigan. I'll get it right this time, talking about the next election. And Glenn's going to stay with us because Glenn is going to, I hope, help us introduce our next guest and tell us about her very full itinerary here in Michigan. You're a big fan and you want to tell us what's going on here.
Absolutely. We are privileged and excited to have Elizabeth Luttrell with us here all week long at the Residential College of Arts and Humanities. And she's going to be working with faculty and staff all week long in the classroom, but she's also going to be in the community. She has graciously consented this coming Saturday at 7 o'clock at the Hannah Community Center in East Lansing to do a benefit for the Center for Poetry.
Yes, that's a wonderful activity on campus. It's so good to have you in our town. Yeah, and you've been here before.
I have, for the Great Lakes Folk Festival,
Yes.
which is really great.
So what do you think? You're a fan of the community here? Or?
Yeah, well, it's every time that I've been here, it's been insanely welcoming and very, very appreciative of the music that I do. So I always like that.
Oh, that's great.
And my mom is going to be coming to join me. Sandy Luttrell will be here on Saturday.
Oh, it would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And you're going to go to Elderly Instruments too, I hear.
That's right. Friday afternoon for their lunchtime concert.
Oh, that's wonderful. Is there any chance, we see, now those are people who are wise enough to tune in to our webcast at the same time. It's a new webcam. I'm glad you're breaking that in this evening, everyone. If you go to LansingOnlineNews.com, you'll see our live webcast on Ustream. But I was hoping that you have your wonderful banjo here with you.
I do.
And can you tell us a little bit about the instrument?
Oh, this specific instrument?
Yeah, it looks like it may have a history.
Yeah, well, if you can see the little
Yeah.
worn out places, it doesn't have a skin head like many of the old ones do, some of the new ones. It's got a little plastic head with some frosting on it, and the frosting is all worn away at the place where your thumb and forefinger rest when you play. And I didn't do all of that wearing because this is not a new banjo. But yeah, the pot is from the 1920s.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a Slingerland banjo.
That's a familiar name. My husband is a musician and plays everything with strings on it, so it's
Yeah.
good to see that. Yeah. I was hoping you might actually, would you be willing to sing for us and give us a bit of a preview? Oh, that'd be great. Tell us a little bit about the song, maybe?
Sure. This is, I'll do one called East Virginia, and it's related to a bunch of other songs. And it's, for me, it's not quite autobiographical. It's backwards. The lyrics are, I was born in East Virginia, North Carolina. I did Rome. I was actually born in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
Oh.
When I went to college, it was in Williamsburg, Virginia, so in the eastern part of the state. But this, I got this version from Buell KZ, who's a Kentucky instrumentalist and a wonderful, wonderful singer. I was born in old East Virginia, North Carolina. I did roam. There I met me a fair, pretty maiden. What was her age? I did not know. Her hair, it was of a dark brown curly, and her lips a rosy red. On her breast she wore a ribbon. Oh, don't I wish that I was dead. Her papa said that we might marry. Her mama said it would not do. Some dark night, if you'll take a ramble, I will run away with you. For I'd rather be in some dark holler where the sun refused to shine. As for you, to be another man's woman, never on earth to call you mine.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Great.
Yeah, it's just gorgeous. So I have a question for you. Would you tell me a little bit about, you come from a musical family then? Is this a tradition?
Yeah, you can say that. My mother was always singing around the house when I was growing up. And what I really got into was the Appalachian ballads. And I grew up in rural Virginia. Actually, the town is called Rural Retreat. So
That kinda
gives
says
you
it
an
all.
idea. If you get a visual from that, it's probably accurate.
Rural male.
Lots of mountains. It's very beautiful, and there's a lot of string band music going on there. Lots of fiddles and banjos. But ballad singing kind of died out. My mother grew up outside of Philadelphia, and kind of followed her love of the mountains into Virginia, where she married my dad. And
There's
we
this
listened-
rural tradition.
yeah, well, you know, he grew up in Virginia and North Carolina, and so they were into, you know, they had their recordings of the folkies of the time, and I grew up listening to that and hearing Mom sing a lot. And when I was a teenager is when I started to really seek out the ballads. So
Where do you dig them out? Where do you find them?
lots of recordings, but what really sparked that research for me, because there's a lot in the Library of Congress and
Oh.
the Smithsonian Folkways and field recordings of the really old, you know, great singers, and a lot of books, of course. But what sparked it was I went to a music camp in West Virginia, and that was where I met Sheila K. Adams, who's a wonderful singer and storyteller from North Carolina. She learned the ballads from her family and her neighbors growing up. So.
Doesn't it seem so fitting, Glenn, that it's for the Poetry Center? Because, I mean, really, this is our rich poetic tradition of music.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, when is the event, the actual fundraising event?
The
What
actual
should be-
fundraising event is this Saturday, November the 17th. It's at the East Lansing Hannah Community Center. It is a benefit, so it is donation based, and it starts at 7 o'clock. Doors open at 6:30. We'd love to have anyone come along.
Oh, that's wonderful. And your mother will be joining you?
She will be there.
Now do your musical tastes completely overlap, or does she?
Oh, pretty closely.
close?
There's some things that I like that she, you know, has never gotten into.
Okay. Does she play an instrument?
She used to play a little banjo, but she's gone off breaks. But she's always been mostly a singer, and that instrument's still just fine.
One of the things I always love is that there is a difference in the melodies when it's from people from the same families. It's like the Ink Spots, you know, they were the group that they were four brothers, you know, so
I remember.
there's something about the genetics when you're singing with people that share the same genes. There's a harmonizing that I don't know that's possible among strangers. That's exciting.
Well, we had fun with it.
So now you're a recording artist as well. So will you,
Yeah.
are your albums available at Elderly and places
They
like
are,
that?
yeah.
Okay, and you'll have some
And there,
Saturday
and
night.
I have lots with me.
Good, good.
So don't worry.
You will
Good.
not run out.
I will not run out no matter how many Christmas presents you by. Yeah.
Is there any chance we could get you to play us one more song?
Sure. How about I just sing one?
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
This is fairly short. I have to keep an eye on that because I know some 6-minute kind of.
Yeah, she has some
Try-
great
We have
long.
another guest.
Try
Yeah.
not to do that on the radio.
Yeah.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a fine bird. She sings as she flies. She'll cause you no trouble, for she'll tell you no lie. I'll build me a cabin on the mountain so high. I'll think on my true love as she passes me by. Her love is like a spring day that swiftly turns cold. She cares not for true love, but only for gold. Make my grave on the hillside, near the nest of the dove, so she can mourn for me, like I mourn for my love. Oh, the cuckoo, she's a fine bird. She sings as she flies. She'll cause you no trouble, or she'll tell you no lie.
Wonderful.
Beautiful,
Wow.
just beautiful.
Thanks.
Now that's almost a yodel at times, but it isn't. Is there a
Yeah.
term for that?
I've heard people call that a glottal stop.
A glottal stop? Okay.
Um,
All right.
But I've also heard people call it a yip.
A yip. Oh, I
Or
like
a-
that.
Or a break, or a sigh, or
Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I think people are going to have a real treat. And now that's Friday at Elderly at 2?
At
And-
noon.
At
Noon.
noon.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody would be really
High
late.
noon.
High noon.
high noon.
And then Saturday at the Hannah Center in East Lansing at 7.
That's it, yeah.
Okay, so 2 on Friday and 7 on Saturday. Great, that's wonderful.
Noon on Friday.
Noon on Friday. Noon. Noon. I keep doing
Dyslexic
that.
on the.
I know, it's bad. It's just. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about another big fundraiser coming up here.
Right, it's the East Lansing Haven House 3rd Annual Cookbook Tailgate Party at Schuler's Eastwood on Wednesday at 6 to 8 p.m. And joining us is the Executive Director of the Haven House Shelter, and it's Angie Mayu.
Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Is it Mayo or Mayo?
If you're from Louisiana, Mayo. If you're from Michigan, Mayo.
See, that's what Bill's
should've-
from Michigan. I guess
I
I'm from
should've known.
Louisiana. When you're Buckaroo, you care. So
Yeah.
the EU
Well,
accent.
Castanet,
Yeah, Castanet. Yeah.
We have our name on a wall because we got thrown out of a place called Canada.
See?
So, Angie, first, I think a lot of people probably do not know exactly what Haven House is and what it does. So give us an idea of that.
Haven House is a family shelter for families. But what really sets us apart from others, there's a couple of things. One, we accept every family, no matter what their makeup is. And what does that mean? It means we take dads, and the other shelters can't take fathers. So we can take a 2-parent family, we can take a single dad, we can take a single mom, we can take grandma who has custody of the kids, whatever. The other population is the teen boys. The other shelters have a cutoff of either age 7 or age 12. So if you have a teen boy or a boy age 13 to 18 that's in school, he also can come in with your family. So no matter what your family makeup is, we don't want to split you up. And we want you to come in and work on it together and be a support system for everybody. And then our sole purpose is not really just to provide shelter, but to stop the homelessness. So what we want people to do when they come in is to find a home, and that's what we spend all of our time on. And so every day each family meets with a case manager and goes over what housing they looked at yesterday and what was the results of it, what appointments do they have set up for today. If they don't have an appointment set up, they're turned away. You must have a housing appointment every day set up so that you can end your homelessness. We're there to support you and help you, but you have to find your own housing. And then after that, our big push really is to help them once they're in housing, because we want them to stay in housing. We don't want them to have to come back. And so everybody that moves into shelter, or moves into their own housing, is offered a program that we call Partners in Progress. And what that does is we continue the work we started at the shelter in their new home. So once they get to their new home, then we have a case manager that goes out and works with them in their new home. They create a new budget for the budget now that they live in an apartment or a house or whatever. They figure out where their resources are in their own neighborhood. They set some goals with that case manager, and they work with her for 6 months. And then that kind of keeps them in their housing for 6 months, which is the hardest part. Statistically, families or individuals will lose their housing in the first 3 months. So we get them past the hardest part and then kind of that stabilization part. And then after that, we're still there for assistance if they need it, but we're not in their home every month. But we continue to call the landlord for the next 6 months to make sure that rent's getting paid on time and they're stable. And it kind of gives them the opportunity to still, if that door's open, to come and see us.
How many families are in your in your house throughout the year? How many different families?
In the last 2 years, we've pushed what we've called rapid rehousing, so we're trying to get families to stay in our shelter for much less of a time. And so we've increased we've decreased their stay by 20 days in the last 2 years, 10 years each time. So in the last 28 years, we've helped 92 to 100 families. The last 2 years, we've helped 150. So we've increased by 50%. That means a lot of different things. One, I turned away less families because I got 50 extra families in there, which is about another 100 kids,
Yeah.
which is a lot.
Yeah.
And 50 to 60 more parents in there. And that makes a huge difference. You don't want your kids in shelter for 30, 40, 60 days, for not 6 months. You want to get in and get out and get them back to normal. And so what we've done is raise some funding, and the Cookbook Project is working towards that, so that we have first month's rent and security deposit in-house that we can help them move in. So as soon as they find a house, we help them with the assistance, the cash to get in, get them out immediately, and then set them up with another case manager so that they stay successful.
How many of the people that you help are eligible for Section 8 housing assistance?
All of them.
All of them. And how has that worked over the years? Is that program as supportive as it needs to be? Is it helping enough people?
That is, to me, Section 8 is the answer.
Okay.
It's the absolute answer. What folks need is help. To give you an example of a typical family, which is a single parent, whether it's a mother or a father, and one child. If they don't have a job, so they're getting some cash assistance, their income is $409 in cash, and between $200 and $300 in food assistance, depending on what their rent burden is. So $409, that has to pay rent, utilities, diapers, shampoo, soap, clean dish soap, all of that. Rent's $400, plain and simple. Rent's going to be $400. They have $9 to get the rest. Section 8 is what they need.
Yeah.
A lot of times we talk about why people are homeless, and we're going to end homelessness. Michigan has a 10-year plan to end homelessness. We're about 5 to 6 years into that. The VA put out a 5-year plan to end homelessness, and nationally they've also done a 10-year plan. There will always be homeless people. Things happen. People lose their jobs, people get divorced, that kind of thing happens. But there is no need for people to be homeless for an extended amount of time. There isn't a need for that. People need a safety net, but they don't need someone to keep them in that safety net for years. They got to be pushed towards the next step. So,
Can you explain to me, because I think some of our listeners are probably questioning, what is this bias against men? How come the other shelters can't take in dads, they can't take in teenage boys? Some of us kind of think that we may know, but I want to know what there is.
well, I'm not sure I got a scientific answer, but I got an experience answer.
Yeah.
When sheltering started, there weren't shelters in the beginning of time. The churches did that.
Yeah.
And the churches had moving shelters. So your church did it one week, and then the next week another church did it. And they did it like that. And then they said, this is a lot of people. And they got some statistics, and they got people they got the government and some people in their own community to fund a building that would actually be a shelter. Boys just get a bad rap. They're violent and sexual, is basically what it
That's
comes
what it
down
is,
to.
isn't it? Yeah, that's
It
the
just
perception.
comes down, yes. The other thing is that I don't think before a recent time was there a lot of single dads. I used to call my dad the first Mr. Mom. He was in 1973, an unmarried man got custody of a 2-year-old little girl. Is unheard of in 1973. So I always called him the first Mr. Mom.
Yeah.
And he long hair hippie looking guy. I don't know how it happened, but it worked. And so I don't think there was a big need, at least for single dads. But for 2-parent families, there certainly always has. And I've never understood
But it
that
was always
perception.
widows and orphans, widows
Yeah,
and orphans.
widows.
In fact, that was the
Yeah.
whole relief program was built on that, and
Yep.
it was somehow men should be able to fend for themselves, I guess.
And they're still treated that way. And when they come in, a lot of times I'll have a talk and I'll say, you got it harder than some of the others. When the man goes to Department of Human Services, not that anybody's treated super wonderfully there and they're welcome, but the guys get a lot more pushback.
Yeah.
Why aren't you working? Well, why isn't she working? What's the difference?
Right.
So they do have it a little bit harder in at least getting assistance because one they have a stopper in the pride issue. They don't want to go in and ask. And women have a more open heart and can able to do that. But then when they go in and they get pushed back immediately, they don't want to go back again because it was too painful.
We really need to know about the tailgating cookbook and how that's going to help raise funds. How does that work?
The first question I had, how important is it to your funding?
It's hugely important. Over the last 3 years, this is our 3rd edition, as you stated. It's raised about 10% of our budget, which is
That's amazing.
is absolutely amazing for really a completely volunteer effort. And we couldn't have certainly done it without all the tailgaters willing and able to hand over their secret, most fabulous recipes to us.
So how many recipes are in this year's?
This year we have 150. The first 2 have 100 in each, so this one is a little bit bigger. It's got 50 more recipes, and it's all in color. The first 2 editions were in black and white, and this year we put in the tailgater pictures in color, and ads are in color, and it really looks just beautiful on the inside. Our first 2 are wonderful too, but this color really steps it up.
U of M stew with poison mushrooms? Little delicacies like that for
Wolverines, real Wolverines.
Real Wolverine
Now,
stew? Yeah.
This event at Schuler's Wednesday at 6 o'clock, there's going to be, I think, about 15 of the people who provided recipes coming in. There's going to be a tasting, right?
Yes, we're going to be set up at Schuler's at Eastwood Town Center. We have about 20 of us are going to be bringing in the recipes that we all submitted
That's cool.
into it so you can kind of get a taste test. We did this with our volume 2 and it was a great success. And it was really nice to be able to actually go in and taste stuff. It really enticed you to want that again. We'll also be having the MSU band will be coming up, some of those members. They'll be up there from about 7:10 to 7:30. And they're going to play
this Wednesday, right?
This
This
Wednesday,
Wednesday.
yes. They're going to teach us the kick.
Ah.
I heard. And we're very thankful to Kelly Dean, who provided the transportation for the band to get up to Schuler's for us because they needed to all get up there in one group. So
Oh, that's
And
great.
it's at Schuler's Eastwood, too. I want to make
Yes.
that clear.
And now the cookbooks are available where? at the bookstores and
They're-
online as well?
They're available online, and they're available on our website. You can order online. You can stop in at the shelter at any time and purchase one. And then we have lots of places around town that they're in. They're at Bacon Cakes, it's at Schuler's at Eastwood, it's at Schuler's at Meridian.
Thank you so much, Angie Mayo. I hope everybody joins up on Wednesday night. I want to get there with my video camera and catch all of this.
Yeah, please.
It's the Tailgating on the Banks of the Red Cedar Cookbook, Volume 3. Come join us next Monday night for Lansing Online News, WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing, Michigan. I have to.